Hello and welcome to the Write in the Head podcast, where we have conversations about making it as a screenwriter. We focus primarily on the mindset required to turn your passionate pursuit into a thriving career. Coming up in today's episode, we are welcoming back screenwriter, comedian, and researcher for a major Hollywood studio, Kacey Johnson. Last time Kacey was on the show, we talked about making ourselves noticeable as screenwriters. We didn't have a chance to talk in depth about how to do that using social media, so that is what's in store for you today. Kacey Johnson, welcome back to the show for part 2. We're going to pretend that we didn't just do this part and then have a technical glitch, so we're definitely not now doing the whole intro thing all over again. Give me a very quick update. What have you been working on since we last spoke? It's been a few weeks. How's it going?
It's going good, and I'm totally not going to use this opportunity to upgrade my intro.
Hey, look, the tech glitch was by fault, so you upgrade as much as you want. Perfectly fine.
Well, a couple of things. I created an LLC, and it's been approved. The LLC is mainly to help with funding for proof of concept. It's an idea I've had for a while now. I've tried the traditional route of reverse engineering and getting funding, and realizing that's kind of hard when you're an independent writer that's not repped. I'm also in the process still of working on a pitch deck with the producer. I mentioned it briefly last time. It's based on Japanese IP. We're kind of closer to the finish line as I make the visuals more crispy and just more visually appealing for buyers. But that's the main two things I've been working on.
Nice. Keeping yourself very, very busy in all of the good creative ways, and I can only... I can only imagine what it's been like to go through setting up an LLC, but I can do more than imagine because I've done it, and it is possibly, I don't know what the word is here. It's not necessarily boring. It's a weird combination of stressful and boring at the same time, in a way that I don't think anything else I've ever done has been. Was that your experience as well, or was I just doing it wrong?
No, it's definitely boring, and I'm at the process now where all the fees are coming up. So just to get it registered in California, I'm just like, wow, this state, it taxes everything. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this is even before you're up and running. They're charging you a bunch of money just to establish the LLC. Yeah, it's a bit of a racket, but maybe shouldn't say that being an immigrant to this country. Maybe I should just be grateful for being here. Anyway, we're getting way off subject. Let's circle back. So we are talking today about something we touched on in the first episode we did, but we didn't have time to kind of go deep, and I really want to because it's an fascinating conversation, actually. Is streaming doomed, and is the downfall going to be caused by social media and AI? If I could put it into one clickbait, dramatic question, that would be it. So what's your experience with social media as a screenwriter so far, and what made you start to think about this comparison almost between digital media, as we might call it, and traditional either network media or streaming media? What's been the journey so far for you?
I would say I was one of those people that growing up, I was already watching stuff on YouTube. So part of me inspired to be a content creator back when it was more profitable to be a content creator, I would say. It's just, I didn't know how to go about it. I was still in high school at the time, and I thought, I should just still go the traditional networking route of writing the script, getting repped, and having a studio hopefully pick up my project at some point in time. I feel like in some ways social media has helped writers. It's made the barrier of entry significantly lower. And in other ways, of course, it hurts writers. It's kind of hard to get a lot of eyeballs. But for every success story, like I think of Issa Rae, for instance, with Awkward Black Girl, there's some web series that haven't been picked up by a network at all. At the same time, you have streamers like Netflix openly admitting that they see TikTok as a competition because when it comes to the current audience, that's the Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they're watching stuff on their phones. They're watching more user-generated content. They're not really watching traditional media. And
Hmm.
oftentimes the traditional media is reruns of shows that aired 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
Yeah,
So it's,
we can all still sit down and watch episodes of Friends or even Cheers, Seinfeld. We can still
right.
watch those.
Yeah, so it's definitely interesting. But I would say, especially as a screenwriter, involved with so many like Facebook groups as well, where I'm posting stuff about the projects I'm working on, whether it's a casting call or I would like eyes on the script and vice versa. I'm in a writers meeting where most of us met through Zoom. So it's both a necessary good, but also could be a bit evil. There is a dark side of social.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we could talk about that ad nauseum when it comes to even things like mental health as well. But let's sticking to the content side of things. You mentioned there that it is really hard to stand out as a creator on social media because it is highly saturated. There are literally billions of hours of video. What can we do as screenwriters to stand out on social media? And that, because that's such a big question, I think I'll give you kind of a way into this. Is it about working your way up to partnering with different people? Because I know that's one very popular strategy. Try and get in there with influencers, people that need you to write because they might be great on camera, but they can't write. So they hire writers. That's one way.
Yeah.
Or is it about just doing your own thing, trying to find your quirks, your niche, and standing out that way by going essentially from beginning to end, just being the writer, the creator, the editor, everything all in? Which do you think there's one or the other? Is it a combination of the two?
I feel like it's definitely a combination of the two, just because the second one is not feasible long term. You'll burn out trying to be the writer, the creator, the actor, the director, the star. It's so many moving parts. And you have to include marketing. Like, are you marketing just on YouTube? Let's say you're just having content on YouTube. You still have to market your content on other platforms such as Instagram, Twitter. Are you creating it based on your personal? Are you doing something that's entirely different? A perfect example is the thing I'm working on right now, right on. Like, we have two separate accounts for it. It's an Instagram account just for the pilot itself, just introducing the pilot. There's also a separate not YouTube, TikTok account as well. So I do encourage writers to think about eventually partnering with someone, whether it is an influencer, but typically an influencer will reach out to you if they really like your writing, or they'll have submissions, and just hoping that comes into fruition. I've been in situations where an influencer reached out to me to write and nothing happened. I have friends who are currently writing for influencers, and they said that it's probably one of the most flexible and creative they've ever been able to do, because influencer is not as limited as the studio in terms of what type of content they can put out there. Is it advertiser friendly? Typically, influencer already has a built-in audience. So you're coming in as a writer with some idea of what to write versus doing research and trying to make sure you're staying within the mandate of a network.
Yeah. And in your experience, because I wonder about this a lot, is it let's try to get something noticed on social media as an end result, or is it let's try to get something noticed on social media so we can then transition into being in a writer's room, selling feature script? Do you think we should still be aiming at that, or do you think that's kind of maybe out of date now, and the long-term plan should just be no, let's just build something strong on social media as an end result?
I feel like the end result should still be the feature films, the series, because I think of the influencers I grew up watching, whether it's Lily Singh, and she had her show on NBC, or even RDC World, and they're in talks right now with creating their own content. With Crunchyroll. I feel like it's important for writers to still dream big, but just understand that the journey for us is different than it was 10, 15 years ago. It may be harder for you to get in because there's so many other writers putting their content out there, but I wouldn't see it as something super bleak. Just have fun with social media, see what works, what doesn't. It gives you a lot of playground just to experience. And I feel like one of the biggest things, especially if you're a writer who wants to be a producer, director, social media kind of forces you to be that already, because you have to think about your budget, you have to think about marketing, you have to think about all these moving parts when it comes to social media that you don't simply think about if you're just writing a script and submitting it to fellowships.
Yep, very true. You have to think about a lot more of it. And there's metrics. That's the thing I love about social media is you get so much more in the way of direct feedback, not just from the metrics, but comments, reposts, all of the engagement that you can get on social media is, I can't even say how many orders of magnitude more feedback you get compared to blindly submitting to a lit manager or a development exec who maybe won't even respond,
Right.
much less give you detailed feedback about your work. So compared that to, just tying it together with something else, the rapidity at which you can post on social media and gain that feedback every post versus writing a script could take you 6 months. You send it to somebody, they don't get back to you. You've learned very little, if anything. On social media, creating these posts and sharing it to get feedback, you can do that on a daily basis for some people.
Yeah.
Very, very powerful stuff. What's the downside of taking this approach? Because it is fast and furious. You would have to post very frequently, so it's maybe not going to be your best content. You probably need to build some kind of team unless you're doing it all on your own, which, as you said earlier, you'll probably burn out. So there's some difficulties. What else is there? How can we overcome those difficulties? How can we use social media, like you said, in a fun way? How can we enjoy this new, not that new anymore, but semi-new way into the industry?
I would say see social media as a portfolio, not really as an end goal, because it takes years to build an audience. I think that's something that a lot of people, including myself, we tend to forget that it's actually really incredible that 50 people are watching something, 50 strangers. And it feels so small when it's on social media because we're so used to those bigger views of seeing millions of views and thousands and hundreds of thousands of comments. But honestly, especially if you're just starting off, that's probably not going to happen. And not to chase the viral moments. Do the content that you like to do, and trust me, the viral moment will come. I've been viral a few times where I just write stuff and I'm just having fun with it. Was it a great experience to be viral? Yes. Did it equate to any monetary value? No. That's something that I feel like is something I wish I knew, is that being viral doesn't necessarily mean success. A lot of people go viral every day and we never hear from them again. So I think that's something to keep in mind as well when posting these materials. The biggest downside, I think you mentioned it a bit, it's you don't know what type of feedback you will receive. And oftentimes it could be a bit jarring to see a comment that's so negative and it's not even about the project. It's about your appearance or something like you literally can't control about yourself. So just give yourself grace in those moments. And yeah, I feel like it really also depends on where you're posting your content. Is it short form content such as the TikTok or Instagram Reel? Is it more long form like YouTube and Twitch? Are you streaming the content? Like those are things to keep in mind as well, because those parameters can be both a good thing and a bad thing. If you're doing content on short form, just keep in mind that yes, TikTok technically allows 10 minutes, but on average, the average TikTok user is not watching 10 minutes of content. Like, you might want to split it up a bit just for it to be more digestible, which in my opinion is also another downside of social media. I feel like it's changed how we consume media in its entirety. Like the attention span is significantly less. You have to be, as a writer, even more quick when it comes to a pitch. Like you have to see your videos like a log line. Like you only have 2 sentences at most to really grab and hook at your viewers. So make sure those like few seconds really count. Otherwise, a person's going to go on another video. Like you gotta, in a way, as a writer now, you have to think of yourself not just as a writer, but as an audience. Like how do you interact with social media? And you were watching this as a user, would you be interested in your own content and having those conversations with yourself? And if you have a team, with your team as well.
I think that's the golden rule, isn't it? If would you watch the content that you're creating? Because that is in alignment with, are you enjoying the content you're creating? And so to kind of give you an example of this, when I started this podcast, I knew I was going to post on YouTube because I'm familiar with the platform. I enjoy the platform. I'm a regular user of the platform. It's where I listen to almost all of my podcasts. So, okay, let's do YouTube. Eventually spread to other platforms, of course, but that's where I'm going to start. My goal is to do the first 20 episodes. So I did not set a goal around subscribers, around view count. I just set the goal, do 20 episodes, then review, then think where you're going next, then analyze all the metrics you've got in YouTube's wonderful analytics suite. Do some more keyword research, go back and optimize thumbnails. You know, if you start out paying attention to all of that stuff, you become kind of a servant to this need to get clicks, to get views, to get subs. And it's obviously the same on every platform. Whereas if you just start with a goal to, I want to put out a decent amount of content that I would enjoy watching, that for me, that's a much more enjoyable way of doing it. And I think time will tell, because this podcast is brand new and it hasn't built a big audience yet. But I think that's the way to build a big audience in the end, because you'll have the longevity. You can stay in the game. You can do it longer because you're enjoying doing it. So I could probably spend a few days brainstorming a video that might go viral. And by the way, that's such a waste of time because no one knows what's going to go viral. But even if it did, if it was just crappy content that I didn't enjoy watching, I wouldn't feel good about the virality of the whole thing. So going back to your point there, I just don't chase those moments. Just kind of come at this with the attitude, I think, at least this is my opinion, tell me if you think I'm wrong. I need to do something that I enjoy doing, and I will eventually find the audience that enjoys that type of content.
I totally agree. I feel that some of my most favorite content, even if it did not go viral, I just had fun doing it and just testing out, oh, what if I do an angle like this with the camera on my phone? I think that is what people enjoy. Like, we want to see you having fun on social media. We don't want to see you doing what looks like an obligation.
And I loved what you said a minute ago about 50 people listening to something is a lot. It's so true, because you see Mr. Beast or Sam Sulek, or the podcast I listen to, Modern Wisdom, Impact Theory, Diary of a CEO, 3, 4, 5, 6 million subscribers, hundreds of thousands of views. And compared to that, my channel that currently has, I think, 199 subscribers, maybe 200 when I post this video, it seems insignificant. But when I think about standing in a room full of 200 people that want to listen to my content, that's kind of amazing. That's quite a few people, actually. That would fill, a reasonable sized auditorium. 200 people, that's, if they all showed up to hear me speak about something, I would be very flattered.
Yeah. I feel like that's something that someone told me once as well, and I kept it in my pocket. Every time I start getting overwhelmed, like, oh, only a few people saw it, I just remind myself, these are strangers who don't know you. So just remind yourself, like, even if it's just one person, having an audience is incredible. Like, give yourself a clap on the back for that.
I think it's just so important to keep things in perspective. You might say, oh, this video only got, my average video view at the moment is around 700 or 800. I've had 2 that went into the 2,000 or 3,000s. But on average, it's around 700 to 800 views. And you think, well, that's not many. But then again, you think, I don't know who these people are. They don't know me. Some of them do. Some of them are my friends, obviously. But for them to actually sit and listen to, on average, about 30 minutes of my content, because I know from looking at YouTube analytics, the drop-off point is typically around 30 minutes. So I need to think about how to make my podcasts more interesting in the second half of the episode. But it's incredibly flattering. And the other thing to bear in mind is that's how every YouTube channel started. That's how everyone started. They weren't getting millions of views immediately. So I think you always have to bear in mind, where did people start? How long did it take them to get there? There's a guy called Chris Williamson, and he hosts the Modern Wisdom podcast that I was just referring to. And I think he said that last year he got more subscribers. I think he got 80% of his current subscribers in the last year compared to the 6 years before that. Because it just compounds. After a while, the more people that know about you, the more people talk about you, and so your subscribers can build very quickly. But for the first few years, that won't happen because you haven't got enough momentum behind you. Anyway, I feel like we're going a bit into the weeds in how to build a YouTube channel, which is it's not really what we wanted to talk about. Going back to screenwriters, using social media, building what I have heard referred to as a stack of undeniable proof. That is a quote from Alex Hormozy. I did not make that up. He's very good. He's an entrepreneur. He talks about this as, don't just say that you can do something. Build a stack of undeniable proof that you can do it. And I think that has been in my head about that's what social media is for me as a content creator. It's a chance to prove not just that I can write a script, but that I can make actual content. Is that how you tend to see it as well?
Yes, and I feel like that's how a lot more people in Hollywood are seeing it as well. Going back to the Issa Rae example, she got discovered because of Opera Black Girl, a YouTube channel she did, like a YouTube series she did. So she's showing an executive, she's showing the agent who eventually signed her that not only am I a writer, but I can shoot, I can direct, I can build a team of people, and I can build an audience. So that way, you're not selling me to an audience that's never heard of me. I already am coming with a built-in audience. I think that's something that what makes social media powerful for a writer is this is a writer's opportunity to build an audience. There's a stereotype that writers, we never leave the house. So it's a safer way, I guess, to build an audience where you don't have to leave the comfort of your home and eventually just start stacking in the views.
Love that. Absolutely. Yes, we are known to be basement dwelling creatures that rarely see the sunlight and get dosed up on Mountain Dew every day. Although I know in your case it's good quality cold brew,
it's cold brew, yes.
Yeah, definitely. I lean more towards espresso, sometimes over ice, but yeah, same thing. Yeah. I want to open up Pandora's box now and bring in the AI of it all, which is somewhat linked to social media, but obviously its own separate beast as well. What's your opinion on this whole AI revolution that we're going through? Do you think it is going to be the end of screenwriters within the next 5 years or less? Do you think we're still safe? How do you see the situation with artificial intelligence?
I don't think it's the end all be all for screenwriters. I do think that screenwriters need to be careful and remember that terms and conditions. Read the terms and conditions when you're submitting to film festivals, when you're submitting projects, even if you're doing something as simple as an interview. A perfect example is my friend sent me something. He's an actor. He sent me like an AI research where we would get paid $150 to be interviewed. And I just happened to read the contract and I noticed Meta Platforms, which of course is on my Facebook, is part of this study. And it basically, in layman terms, it was saying that any information we discussed on this interview, whether it was our character or plot, would officially be their property. So it's very important for writers to understand when you're posting your content on social media, especially with Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. There's all this talk about how they're using these videos to train their AI. And there might be repercussions, there definitely going to be repercussions in the near future based on that, as we start seeing more content that may look familiar because it's based on someone's story or it's based on someone's page. But do we own those materials? I feel like part of the things we forget is the reason why the internet is free is because we are the product. our data is being mined, our data is being sold, and our data is being used for these social media platforms for advertising. It's a very vicious cycle. So just being careful with that, I think is important. I'm trying not to sound dystopian, but that
You're doing a good job. You don't
yeah,
sound dystopian. You don't.
thank you. I think it's important though for writers to be very careful and just make sure that you're reading what to post and stuff. Because I know Facebook recently changed their terms and conditions, and they mentioned in outlining that they will be using our content and profiles to train the AI. So just be very careful with what you're posting. If you feel like your idea is something that is a passion project, I feel like that's fine. But if you feel like this is a end all be all, like this is a project I want to get picked up by studios, this is why I want to get picked up by an agent, I would say maybe look at other avenues before posting it directly on social media.
That's interesting. I can imagine there's a few people that want to lead with their best work on social media, and what you're saying here is maybe keep the very, very best stuff for more of a traditional route, maybe submitting, going through agents, lit managers, even attorneys, just to protect yourself a bit more.
Exactly. Which is hard because what you consider your best work may not be your best work too.
Yes,
So
I've heard comedians talk about this a lot recently. So stand-up comedians now are posting daily on TikTok,
yeah,
and Instagram, of course. And the struggle for them is if I post all my good stuff, I've got nothing left when it comes to my live shows. Everybody's already seen everything. So I want to keep my best jokes for my live shows. So then what do I put on social media? It's a really interesting conundrum that they find themselves in, and kind of similar for every creator if you do want to build something off of social media, because that's the part you need to save your best work for. So now what are you posting on social? Interesting, isn't it?
it's very interesting. And I feel like it's easy for a content creator to get into the weeds of things. Um, Especially consider I also do stand up, so I know firsthand just how it is. Like, should I post this material? It includes jokes that I haven't even told to a live audience yet. It was just an open mic, and realizing like it doesn't hurt necessarily, especially if you're starting out. And similar to a writer, I feel like it doesn't hurt when you're starting off to post stuff. Like just post anything because you don't know what's going to click. But
Yeah.
as you
Yeah.
notice your audience is being built, as you're getting up there as a writer, let's say you're getting interest from agents, or you're starting to either create that pitch deck or meeting with people to potentially pitch, that's when you need to start thinking more about protecting your work, whether it's copyright, whether it's being very mindful of where you're posting, because you can't copyright an idea. I think that's something that a lot of times we forget as writers is yes, you can copyright the script itself, you can copyright all the words, but the idea itself can never be copyrighted. So if, let's say YouTube pulls your idea as an original, you can't really argue that in court. Sure, you have California, they have the Idea Act, but it's very hard to argue an original idea in court, especially since, in my opinion, there's no such thing as an original idea. We've been in this world for so long at this point. As much as we love to think as writers that no other writer has ever thought of this idea, they probably have to some degree, to some
Yeah.
extent.
Yeah. And that is one of the reasons I'm not immediately concerned about the presence of AI. AI is, the comedian Jimmy Carr referred to AI as a covers band. It is very good at doing impressions of things, not so good at just coming up with original material. And since that's kind of what every writer's dream is to come up with something that's original and quirky, to your point, it's not going to be 100% original, but if we can become more original than what current AI is capable of,
Yeah,
then we're safe. And at the moment, that's absolutely true. And I would say specific, or not specifically, but especially in comedy. So
yeah,
asking AI to create jokes is, if it's funny in and of itself, it's it uses a very logical process to come up with a joke. which completely kills the humor. So I think as
Exactly.
comedic writers, we're probably quite safe. Look, who knows? We're reaching the point where it's impossible to predict what is coming in the next few years because it's accelerating so quickly. So I am very open to being wrong about all of this, but it feels at the moment like we will still need the human touch, at least if we stay with the current kind of consumption of media. Now, that itself might shift. It might shift away from there being platforms, because if AI is generating content so quickly based on user prompts, then there is a world that exists where we don't need platforms to do that. You could sit at home, type in a command, generate your own movie, and spend the next 2 hours watching it, and it would be a great movie for you because you just essentially created it. But we're nowhere near that happening yet. And even if we did get there, I think most people would suddenly realize, oh man, making a good movie is really hard. I thought I had a good idea. This sucks. This is not great at all.
And I think that's why the SAG and even the writer's strike was so important, because some of the provisions they added were AI protection. So, for instance, an actor's likeness cannot be used for AI training. So it's very hard to create that good 2-hour movie if you cannot have AI versions of some of your favorite actors.
I'm now imagining somebody trying to create their own the next Avengers movie, but none of the cast are allowed to be in it. So everybody's not quite what they should be. There's no Robert Downey Jr., there's no Chris Hemsworth, Scarlett Joe, none of them are in it. There's just an AI generated likeness. I couldn't watch it, to be honest. I just couldn't. That would not be
That would be
enjoyable. It would be terrible. Yeah, even with a good script, which is also not possible with AI at the moment. But again, heavily caveating this because we don't know what's coming. I'm just saying I don't feel particularly panicked by it, and actually I do feel quite empowered by it at the moment. I think this is a really nice window of opportunity for writers to use AI for their benefit. I'm using it. I use ChatGPT sometimes to help generate some ideas and just help me think in different ways, because having said it's a covers band, it does impressions of millions and millions of people, because they're the ones that have fed, if you think about it in a certain way, obviously not millions of people programming it, but it's taking information from millions of resources. And so it's like having a whole world of people feeding into your ideas, which it does give you ideas you probably wouldn't have thought about. At least you wouldn't have got there as quickly without asking ChatGPT or whichever your preferred platform is. So I think it's really useful for things like that. It does get you thinking about things differently, and then it's up to you to go ahead and turn that into a decent story, a decent script, or a decent piece of content. Is that kind of how you feel about are you using any AI in your workflow at the moment?
Honestly, not really, just because my life is crazy enough that I could just pull from my personal experiences. Very grateful for that. Grateful after the moment, not in the moment. In the moment, I'm like, why is this happening to me?
I guess I must have a really boring life then, because I draw from ChatGPT instead of my own life. That's probably a fair comment. Not much tends to happen to me. I think we've covered everything that we wanted to cover. One question I did have for social media, and then we will wrap up the call, because we mentioned it very near the beginning of this episode, and that is reaching out to influencers.
Yeah.
It sounds like you've had some experience with this, and I would love to just pick your brains on that for a couple of minutes, because I personally don't have experience with that. It's part of the game plan, but I have not started to really do it yet. I've connected with people on LinkedIn, but that's definitely more, you're a producer, I'm a writer, let's have coffee. Reaching out to influencers on social media, is there a way to do it? Have you picked up on any do's and don'ts that we could share with the audience?
I guess mainly I picked up on don'ts. But also my experience was there was an influencer who he was trying to create his own streaming platform. So he just made a post about he's looking for writers. I just have to apply. I submitted my own material. His assistant really liked it, so I thought things were going to go well. But then a lot of personal things happened in his life. He lost his best friend, and so that the whole conversation kind of dissolved quickly and it ended up not going anywhere. And there's one influencer, like I just met at an event. I'm like, hey, I really love your material. By the way, I'm a writer. If you like ever want to work together. And he gave me the nice polite, oh, sure. And we never spoke after that. So it's definitely, I would say it's kind of hard depending on how many like viewers the influencer has themselves. And some influencers are already incredible writers, or they already have a team. Like, there's one of my friends, he writes for an influencer, been doing it now for about 2-3 years. He loves it because it gives him so much creative freedom that writing traditional networking doesn't. Gets paid more. So he's like, man, like if I could go back in time, I would honestly go the influencer route. I didn't realize like just how much power influencers have, where if they have enough audience, they're not getting told by the studio what to do. They're able to tell the studio what they want to do because they're bringing in the audience. And it's something I didn't think about until he said that. I was like, that makes sense actually. If you're bringing in what the studio wants, the studio is going to be a bit more open to you, especially if you're a newer writer versus, you know, if you just have like a script that you won a couple of festivals in, the studio is still going to have their own mandate and vision. I feel like maybe not reach out to Mr. Beast. That's kind of big, and I feel like Mr. Beast has his own team, but definitely reach out to smaller influencers. I think a lot of times people see an influencer with maybe 1,000 followers and do not think that it's worth reaching out to, but all the time, micro influencers also get brand deals, also get sponsorships as well. And I feel like it's easier to reach out to a micro influencer and grow audience with them just because you're both starting off versus, like I said, for reaching out to someone like a Mr. Beast who has millions and millions of subscribers, has his own team. At this point, like if he wanted you, he would reach out to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It reminds me of this. I don't know if this actually happened, but there's a story that goes, it's about a man who started with a paper clip and swapped it for things all the way up to a speedboat. Have you heard this?
Oh.
So the story goes, it's kind of a legend, I think, but he had a paper clip, and the first step was to go to somebody and say, can I swap this paper clip for that can of Coke? And because that's only a kind of a mild step up, the guy said, sure. And then he took the can of Coke and he said to the next person, can I swap this can of Coke for whatever the next thing is? I don't remember the details. But the point of the story is if you do that often enough, you get to, can I swap this house for that speedboat?
Yeah.
And it's kind of, that's the way I see reaching out to influencers. It's, you want to go with somebody who's got more followers and subs than you, or more plays, whatever your platform is, but not too many more. But once you've done that, your level rises, and then you go for the next one, and then the next one, and so on. So you can kind of build up. So yeah, from paperclip to speedboat would be the way to describe that kind of pathway. And it can be frustrating because that's going to take longer.
Right.
But I think ultimately, if you just reach out to the really big channels or accounts, that's going to be more frustrating because you probably won't hear from them.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because we'd all love to just get piggybacked right up to the top. Okay, we've done social media. We have done AI. We've talked about influencers. I guess the final question is, if there's somebody listening to this that was essentially me about 2 years ago, which is I don't want to get involved in social media. I'm a traditional media guy. I'm going to sell scripts and I'm going to make TV shows and movies. Any advice to kind of help talk them down from that ledge? Because they might die on that hill. And this is something I've had to come around to. It was unpleasant because as a kid, I kind of dreamed of just making traditional TV and movies, and I don't really understand this whole social media thing. Any words of wisdom for anyone else that might be feeling that way?
Just look at it like the evolution of media. Like there was a time where newspapers did not think radio would replace it. Radio did not think TV would replace it. Social media is just that next step in the machine. And if you read the trades, like Deadline, Variety, Hollywood Reporter, for just a day, it will remind you that, like any other industry, entertainment is being heavily impacted by the economy right now. There's so much mergers going on. So the traditional media that you're chasing is not even what it was when you were chasing it as a kid. I think that's the hardest pill I had to swallow myself. Is I wanted to write on a show one day. I thought, oh, if I just make these steps, it'll be easy. But there's companies I wanted to work for that no longer exist. So just being able to pivot and recognize that just because the landscape changed doesn't mean that it's less than what you dreamed of. And it's okay to dream your dreams.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking to say, in all honesty, I probably won't get to actualize some of the dreams and the visions I had as a child because it just doesn't exist anymore. When I was a kid learning how to play music, I wanted to send in a demo and get signed for a record deal. And then by the time I got around to actually making any music, that wasn't really happening anymore because iTunes. So you have to evolve, and it's painful, but there's a point you get to where you can embrace it. I mean, I'm sitting here now shooting this video that's going to go on YouTube. Like I said, it's a new channel, but I'm going to keep doing it, and maybe it goes somewhere, maybe it doesn't, but I figured out how to have fun with it, and that's really all any of us should be doing, in my opinion, my humble opinion as a creator. But it sounds like you're on the same page with that. Let's just keep having fun making content.
Exactly. And I feel like chasing that traditional media, another pill I had to swallow is it's a job still at the end of the day, and jobs are going to be impacted by the economy. It's a funner job, of course, writing for entertainment, but it's still a job at the end of the day. So anything that's happening
still comes with the same risks, the same instability, the same.
exactly.
I mean, yeah, like you said, if there's another recession, then it could mean goodness knows what. And actually, as a social media content creator, you're in some ways protected from that. It's actually a bit more stable if you can turn it into a monetized operation, which is very difficult, but if you can get there, it does actually have some pretty sturdy legs underneath it, I would say.
It does. And just, like I said, but just have fun, and just be mindful of how you're presenting on social media just a little bit if you're trying to get monetized, because advertisers are still kind of traditional in the sense that they want the videos that their advertisement is on to be advertising friendly. So
that's a really good point.
yeah,
Yes. These super controversial videos that maybe go viral, lots and lots of views, but no chance of getting an advertiser to go anywhere near it. Worth bearing that in mind.
exactly.
All right. Well, you've been very generous with your time. I'm so glad we got to circle back and do part two, because we really didn't have time to go into this on part one. It's been another great conversation. Remind the listeners where people can go to connect with you. Is there a Twitter? Is there, an X? Is there a Facebook or Meta? So many different names these days. Is there LinkedIn? I mean, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, I would say on social media, it'll be Jonique Stars on all platforms. So that's TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. I'm on a social media break, actually. So right now, there's not really content, but that's where my content will be. If you want to connect with me professionally, I'm on LinkedIn as my name, Kacey Johnson. And just keep an eye out on Ride On Productions. You can follow that journey on Pilot Ride on Instagram and TikTok.
We will include all of that in the description. Thank you again for your time. And who knows, maybe there's a part 3 coming up in the future.
Hopefully. I really enjoy our conversations.
Yeah, me too. All right. We'll talk again soon.
Talk soon.